Good afternoon and welcome to the September 19th meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. Can we have our public announcements, please?
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
Okay, before we get started, a reminder to all the commissioners, if you want to speak, you need to push the talk button and speak into the microphone. That goes for staff also. I do not believe that that's part of the podium. If you're a speaker at the podium, just make sure that you speak into the mic so that we can hear you. And also, if you are a speaker today at the podium, please give your name and address for the record. We're going to recess the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting to take on the agenda for the Board of Zoning Appeals. First item is the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Motion by Ms. Mills, second by Mr. McKay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We'll figure out the numbers there. That is approved. There's no other items on that agenda, so we stand adjourned from the Board of Zoning Appeals and reopen the Planning Commission meeting. First item on the Planning Commission meeting is the approval of the minutes of September the 5th. My records show absent was Mr. McKay, Mr. Hartman, and Mr. Florence, and Mr. Klossmeyer.
I move for approval of September 5th, 2019 meeting.
First by motion by Mr. Joe Johnson, second by Mr. Dool. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. You're good. Mr. Hartman, Mr. Florence, and Mr. McKay. Next item would be to see what items we can take by consent. Take the vacation items first. First one is item 3.1, a vacation of the platted access control for construction of a Meddy's restaurant and property zone general commercial. Anybody on the commission want to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this item? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent. Item 3.2, vacation of a platted street setback to reduce a 25-foot setback to 15 foot. Anybody on the commission want to hear this item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this item? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent.
I move to approve item 3.1 and 3.2.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Miles, second by Mr. Johnson, Joe Johnson. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing items. Item 4.1, county conditional use to allow agricultural sales and service on property zone rural residential. Anybody on the commission want to hear this item?
Mr. Chairman, I had a staff question on that item.
Okay. Anybody on the commission want to hear the item other than the staff question? Is there anybody in the audience that want to hear that item? We will hear item 4.1. Item 4.2, city CUP amendment to add a sign and additional canopy to RV storage on parcel 10 Ridge Plaza. Anybody on the commission want to hear this item? We will hear that item. Item 4.3, city zone change to create a new PUD. Anybody on the commission want to hear that item? We will hear that item. Item 4.4 has been deferred to October the 24th. Item 4.5, city zone change from limited commercial to OW office warehouse. Anybody on the commission want to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience want to hear that item? We'll take that on consignment. Item 4.6, city zone change from general commercial to former railroad right-of-way to a central business district. Anybody on the commission want to hear that? Seeing none, anybody in the audience want to hear that? We will take that by consent.
I move for approval of 4.5 and 4.6.
I second.
Got a motion by Mr. Joe Johnson, second by Mr. Green. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's back to item 4.1. Mr. You're out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, you're out with planning staff. Conditional use 2019-33 deals with a request to zone land on the east side of North 247th Street West. We are north of 53rd Street North and just south of the city of Andale. Land that's currently in the city of Andale, or not in, but adjacent to, you can see, is owned light industrial, including part of the land owned by the applicant. This is the Kansas Co-op is requesting an expansion of their operation as it exists at Andale. The aerial photo shows the outline of the property that they now own, and they are expanding the operation for the facility that they have located at this location. There's also a plat that is going through the process, and they approved that at the Planning Commission, and so.
Dave, let me interrupt you just for a moment. We had okay, never mind. Continue on.
So, this is a request for a conditional use for ag sales and service. The existing operation consists primarily of a fertilizer facility that is operated at the present location. They have a site plan shown with their application that I'll get to, that shows a small expansion of that to the east. They're also talking about a large building that will be built south of the present location that will become part of their expanded facility the co-op is placing in that part of the county to service the agricultural community in that part of the county. As you can see from the map, this is in the Andale area of influence. We did contact Andale, and they communicated that their long-range plan showed this as being industrial. Therefore, they did not have any desire to further review the application, and they supported and I had no objection to this request. This is the photo taken from 247th Street, looking east at the site, and you can see the extent of the operation as it exists now. There is a proposal to expand some of this activity further to the east, but most of the property expansion will happen further to the south, which is really in this area. And you can see that we got beans on the rest of the area, but the portion owned by the co-op has been cleared for future expansion if this all gets approved. There is one house, and I think that's what the gentleman that is here wants to talk about, that is east of the property. You can see from the aerial, there's a house immediately to the west of the property on the west side of 247th Street. So the other photos that I have are looking north along 247th. You can see the railroad crossing to the north, and then that's a shot looking south along 247th. And it's this area and this to the left of this picture where the expansion will occur. We find this to be consistent with not only Andale's future plans, but not out of character for an expansion. This is to be primarily, and I'll let the folks from the co-op talk about what they're proposing to do in the facility, but they're growing this is a co-op. It used to be the Andale Co-op and now has been bought by Kansas, which is based out towards Pratt, and they've got a larger operation and are wanting to expand to provide support to the agricultural community in the northwest part of the county. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Dave? Mr. Foster?
Dave, I just want to confirm the R zoning surrounds us with a residential use. Will they be required to have the landscape buffering on the west side as well?
Not necessarily along the street frontage. I don't believe there's a requirement for that. It's adjacent to it, and it does on the east and the south side, and they do show a landscape reserve. We talk about the requirement to extend that further out to the street, but I don't recall that there's a requirement in the code when you're separated by a street.
The county doesn't have a landscape ordinance requirement, so the only thing that would be triggered would be the zoning, either a fence, berms, or landscaping, or some combination of the three. But if they put up a fence, they only have to do one tree every 40 feet.
The only reason they would have to screen along the west side is if they had an outdoor storage area that was located within 150 feet of the street. As long as it's set back that far, then there's nothing required.
Other questions for staff? Seeing none, can we have the agent or owner come forward?
What do you guys?
You'll have 10 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Jeff Boland. I live in Pratt, 1519 Western Avenue. Senior Vice President, Kansas Co-op. If there's any questions.
Anything you want to add to the presentation?
Mainly, as those pictures showed.
There's a mouse
Okay.
you can show there on the
Here we go.
computer screen.
The main thing here is that view here, this is existing, we got fuel, propane, and anhydrous facility along with liquid fertilizer. So this facility here is gonna be office in the front, chemical warehouse, and seed warehouse. This is everything we currently have in town that we've just outgrown. We're gonna consolidate it into one main building.
Any questions for the agent, for the applicant, rather? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this issue? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
I'm William L. Shoemaker. My address is 5731 North 242nd West, Andale, Kansas. The picture, I'm the guy that has the house right next to this thing, right there. Obviously a nice house. When you look at this picture, go back to the driveway, please, if you would for me. Thank you. This that shows the driveway coming into the current facility, please. Okay, well, maybe you don't have one there. I thought you did. Okay, yeah, there we go. That's what I look at today. That's not what I looked at when I bought my house 15 years ago. As far as they're saying this is existing, they've been expanding this thing since I moved in. There was no fence there. The anhydrous tanks weren't there. And they've done nothing but add to that place since I moved in. I'm looking at now, you can see my shirt. I just got my kid back from the Marine Corps. I don't want to be here because I've only got 10 days with him. That's neither here nor there. But the bottom line is with this thing, I'm looking at maybe trying to sell my house for an appreciable value. As this thing goes in, it obviously knocks that down to nothing. They've been nothing but built in, not what a good neighbor would do without at least getting permits and notice of that kind of thing. And now they're going to expand on. Apparently I'm going to be the only one speaking against this thing. But what it doesn't show in these pictures here, I shouldn't be the only one, because straight north of this facility is your fire station, within 500 feet straight north. This is Kansas, north-south winds. They're storing all these anhydrous tanks. Guess who's going to get taken out if there's a anhydrous spill here? This is 2019. Freaks of nature come after anhydrous tanks. I'm talking about the people here trying to make meth and other assorted chemicals that anhydrous is used. As far as a safety issue here, this gate you're looking at right now is left open a lot, more so than it should be as far as security. So yes, I have some real concerns about this facility, the way it's been maintained in the past and what I expect it to be in the future. I guess I'm not going to use up any more time. I'm not used to public speaking. I'm sorry about that. He gave me a little heads up on how to say this thing, but I do have some real concerns. And one other thing, I haven't had my groundwater tested recently, but with all these chemicals that are going to be stored there now and currently and in the future and whatever else they've done, I'd like to see what my well water's worth right today. I don't know. I thought about that when I was coming in. But as stewards of the neighborhood, I don't know how good a job they've done up to this point.
Mr. Shoemaker, you did a better than average job, so if you could stay at the microphone just for a moment in case there's any questions from the commission. Anybody have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, okay, thank you. Oh, Mr. Johnson.
What's the appraised value of your property?
Sure, I couldn't look you in the eye and tell you that. I can tell you what I paid for it 15 years ago. That's about as close as I can give you. I haven't had an appraisal done. That brought up another note. I wasn't even aware of this till about 2 weeks ago. I seen that sign come up across the road, one of my first notice of it, until I got this letter. And currently that sign, which is supposed to be a billboard that you can see, is currently down in the ditch that shows a public notice that this is even going in. It's laying in the ditch. If you're going to put up a public notice, shouldn't be at least keep it up in the air so people can see it?
Mr. Florence?
Have you had any problems with runoffs during the recent rains? Did it run into your property?
I don't believe that the runoff from this facility comes towards me. I think the ditch between us catches that, sir. I believe it does.
Not seeing any others. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thank your son for his service.
Is there anybody else in the audience that want to speak on this issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Yeah, we do. Roberto, you guys have anything you want to add? Okay. Okay, if you would come back, we have a question for you.
Thank you for coming back up. The speaker had some concerns about groundwater contamination, the potential of possible groundwater contamination. The chemicals that you're using, are there any federal requirements, state, local, federal requirements that you have to perform concerning those chemicals?
The containment, I mean, the building containment will be fully enclosed inside the building. So we're the stored product.
Thank you.
Sure, you've come up with this in the past with working around neighbors. What, is there anything you can add that might soften the appearance on this? Got any ideas on that?
I mean, we're open to, not right offhand. I mean, we obviously know there's an issue and we know there's a concern that we would be willing to do any landscaping or trees or as far as a visual concern.
Thank you. Mr. Foster.
Sir, got another question for you.
Jeff, we keep bringing you back. Just
Mr. Green touched upon any regulations. How about KDHE in terms of, the gentleman mentioned that some of the tanks and your facility there up to the northwest had been brought in, and that's been improved. Are there any state regulations relative to fire, environmental concerns that require you to have a secure fence around the entire property?
Brian? I'm gonna let Brian answer that.
Do I need a state name and address?
please.
Brian Nicholson, 802 William Way, Pratt, Kansas. I'm the Vice President of Agronomy for Kansas Co-op. Now, the question was, do you have to have an enclosure around the current facility? No, you have to have lock tagged out tanks, which we do have at those facilities. Going back on the question that Jeff answered before, yes, we do go through state guidelines on containment for the packaged products that are in that facility. And they have to approve those processes also.
Any other questions? Mr. Richardson, staff question?
We got a staff question.
Staff question, okay.
Dave, where the current operation is there, that sort of that square, is that properly zoned for that operation today? It's unclear from the.
Well, it's zone light industrial.
Yeah.
The current operation is here. This light industrial is the county yard,
Okay.
Public Works.
Right. All right, thank you.
All right, and Jason, and then of course you got the railroad that goes through hauling all kinds of materials.
Mr. Joe Johnson?
So really what we're looking at today has nothing to do with the criticism we've been hearing about the tanks. What we're looking at here is an expansion of the sales facilities.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I would add, if you look at the site plan that they have provided, as he talked about, the new building to the south is primarily office and warehouse of other chemicals they provide currently at a facility in Andale. that they've outgrown. The other buildings, they've got a future building to the east, and the south one is identified as a washout area for the equipment they use, that they haul chemicals and anhydrous and other things that are applied to the agricultural fields in large wide area, northwest part of the county and beyond.
What's the will of the commission? Mr.
I'd
McKay?
like to make a motion, we approve subject to staff comments.
We have a motion by Mr. McKay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Green. Further discussion? Mr. Foster?
Even though the county does not specifically require this, I was involved in a similar situation. And at least the applicant at that point was willing to provide some landscape to soften the loss in value of the adjacent neighbor. I would encourage them to do that.
You want to make that an amendment to the motion? Can we, is that something we have the authority? The substitute motion, does that, with this kind of an application, is that something we have purveyed?
No, I don't see it as a substitute motion.
So that's just a suggestion to the applicant? Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next item, please.
It's still me. CUP 2019-29 is a request to amend the Ridge Plaza CUP primarily as it applies to Lot 10, which is the new U-Haul facility that's on the east side of South Holland, immediately north of of Kellogg, as outlined here in red. We handled a modification on this a year ago to accommodate the new facility that's currently under construction. That's an old photo, but that shows geographically where this is. This is the plan, and it shows the new building that's being built on site for U-Haul. The old site plan showed outdoor storage of RVs, and that was approved along this north side, limited mostly to the northeast area, I'm sorry. This request is to expand to allow covered RV parking to go along the north side of this lot, which is to expand that area further to the east, closer to Holland. And then the other modification is a request to allow an on-site sign to replace what was there roughly in this southeast part of the site. And I think we provided you hard copies of that. I don't have it in a slideshow. This is a photograph of the area, and you can see essentially this is where the RV storage would go. I'm looking east from Holland. Here I'm looking south, and there you can see the sign structure that is there. And they want to replace this with an on-site sign, essentially the same location. That's looking south along Holland. This is what is west across the street from the location, and that's looking back north along Holland. And I think the questions are about primarily the sign, but the recommendation from staff is for approval. With respect to the sign, I would say that there are other signs along Kellogg. Also, other language within the CUP allows other signs on site of other parcels to go up to 50 feet and higher. So this one is not out of character at all with what is already existing within the CUP at other locations. So with that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Questions for staff?
So, Dave, help me understand. You're saying the CUP allows 50-foot signs?
There are other parcels within this CUP that do address signs up to 50 feet in height, yes. on this parcel, but other parcels within the CUP.
Can
In
you
fact,
put,
there is a sign that is,
can you put the CUP up there and show me where those parcels are?
not off the top of my head, other parcels, because I don't have the CUP drawing with me, but I know that there's an on-site sign for Comfort Inn that's higher, and some of the signs, the parcels that were discussed further up here along, because this CUP goes clear up to Ridge and Maple. And there were other signs that were identified, language I looked specifically, that allowed some to go higher and up to 50 feet.
Scott?
And then for the parcels where the, on the east side, in the LC zoning along Ridge Road there, this commission recently approved an amendment to allow 3 signs of that height on that parcel.
Can you put the sign, the skeleton of that sign back up, Dave? Yeah, my concern is a sign of 50 feet kind of becomes a new standard along Kellogg if we do this. Looks like Cheddar's maybe has a 50-foot sign, which is because of the elevated roadway. This sign is, as it is, perfectly visible from both ways on grade at Kellogg. Looks like Home Depot, Walmart are both at 30 feet. Davis Moore's at 30 feet. Davis Moore's flagpole looks to be about 50 feet. And again, my concern is that we'll now have 50-foot signs all the way along Kellogg. This is, U-Haul's not an impulse kind of purchase where you need to, it's not where you're going to go eat dinner, that sort of thing. I just think that probably a lower, smaller sign would be adequate to where I'm coming from. The other one that's 50 feet looks to be on down the way at Mays Road is the Kia dealership, and there's an elevated roadway there as well. So, thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thanks, Dave. If we have our agent or applicant come forward, please, you'll have 10 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Roger Goodrick, live 213 West 18th, Hutchinson, Kansas, 67502.
Anything you want to add to the presentation, sir?
Yes, Wood Springs Suites, which is a property adjacent to the east, has a 50-foot sign, which is at the elevated roadway. We're sitting below the elevated roadway. And we just want the ability to be able to see on approach to that elevated roadway.
Mr. Hartman?
Do you know how tall the existing structure is there?
The existing structure is 35 foot.
I think the Woodbridge sign is probably, even though it's higher, it's because it's sort of hidden by the elevated roadway, and it's probably substantially smaller than the square footage that you're requesting, I would think. Although obviously I don't know.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this issue? Okay, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Elba Abru, and I have lived in this neighborhood since 1994. And to be honest with you, for the last 8 years, that development that you had in that corner have bring a lot of detrimental issue in our community. I used to call my house safe haven. Now I have to make sure and be careful enough, because you guys continue to have building business without taking in consideration our neighborhood. We had a great neighborhood in that corner. So I really appreciate the city, because honestly, it doesn't matter to me much if the sign is 35 or 40 on Kellogg. But it do matter to me, and it's gonna get to the point where we, the neighborhood, we will need to ask the city to enclose our neighborhood in order to get the delinquency, traffic, etc., into our neighborhood. So it's everything I would like to say for all of you this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Before you step away, could you please give us your address?
My address is 7931 West University, and we also have owner sheets in Paula Street. We also have another property in Topaz Street. It's very, just kind of the corner of university also. So when you start bringing targets and then those hotels and now this building, you are overcrowding our neighborhood. And what you're bringing into our neighborhood, I'm gonna telling you, it's not the best people in town.
Let me have, if you could stay there for a moment. Is there any questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that very much. Is there anybody else in the audience like to speak on this issue? If not, I'll bring it back to the commission. I'll get that one of these days. Does the applicant like to add anything to their presentation?
Anything you want to say, Roger?
Okay. Now I'll bring it back to the commission. Only my second week, that's right. Mr. Foster.
Dave, could you review the concerns raised by the neighbor there related to, in this request, is there an increase in signage height for anything other than along Kellogg?
No, we're only talking about a sign that would be at this location and a new construction would happen along in here. Nothing happening further to the west of Holland or encroaching further into the neighborhood further to the west.
Second
Not from
question.
this question or this case.
Second question, I think Mr. Richardson has raised a good concern. It's almost like there's three different heights relative to signage. One is trying to see it from the full elevation, then there's a transition, and then you have the ground level. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I do get concerned about going to 50 foot all along here.
Given all the improvements that happened along Kellogg, it doesn't show in this aerial per se, but what is different is all the activity at this location. It is now Eisenhower Expressway that's elevated over Kellogg. Kellogg itself is pretty much at ground level. The sign is going to be visible for eastbound traffic further as you come from the west, but no visibility really for eastbound or for westbound traffic, because you're not going to be able to see over that elevation that occurs where Eisenhower goes across Kellogg now. And this is kind of tucked down behind that. That's why the Comfort Inn has got a sign roughly at that location that's taller than what we're talking about here.
Somebody want to make a motion? Mr. Bill Johnson.
I move to approve for staff comments.
Have a motion by Mr. Johnson, a second by Mr. McKay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Passes 11-1. Next item is 4.3, a city zone change to create a new PUD in the area near West MacArthur and South Seneca.
I will continue. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. PD 2019-09 is a request to create what will be called Passageways PUD. This is currently vacant land that is to the west of South Seneca, north of MacArthur Road. It's kind of bounded mostly on the north side by West Carey Lane, at least on what's identified in the new PUD as Parcel 1. Parcel 2 is on the south side of 235. For those familiar with the area, this is South Meridian, And the property that's identified here as being Zone GO is where the Machinist Union property exists. An aerial of the site, and you can see we're dealing with very much open ground that is undeveloped and has remained undeveloped for a many number of years. Kerry Lane is an improved street, and you'll see in some photos how it gets kind of interesting as we get over into this area, because these are gravel drives that are not all public streets, but we'll cover that. The request is to create a kind of an enclosed, unique community that will be through passageways targeted exclusively as specialized housing for homeless veterans and other veterans in need within the community. There is a massive amount of support within the community for this. And the only way, we had talked with them in development review several months ago, and the conclusion was the only way to really get to where they needed to do was a PUD was the only way to get there. You can see the property location within the comprehensive plan. This is roughly the site plan that has been provided. I'm sorry it doesn't come up much better, but you should have a copy that was provided to you. And within the staff report, we talked about some need to provide additional clarity within what we wanted to see within the language on the PUD. And I think you have been provided a revised copy today from the agent addressing a lot of those concerns. Essentially, what they are talking about doing is to create an enclosed community, closed community to a great degree. I think they call it a gated community within the facility that will have several individual housing units, cabins, whatever you want to call them, that will be places where the individual clientele will live on site. We have a series of buildings being provided, and then a new drive entrance that will connect MacArthur to Kerry Lane that will be a private drive through the facility. And there will be offices and as well as some other community buildings internally to support the operation. And then some other commercial buildings that will be made available to other support entities that I know the agents will talk about in their presentation of what's going on. You'll notice in the site plan, they're also talking about future areas for development. And again, I'll let Susan with Passageway talk about what that's talking about, because they have, as I understand it, a commitment to build a number of these units now, paid 100%, that's coming from various entities within the community. And then as they are hopefully successful, have room for additional cabins and support facilities elsewhere in this parcel 1. The use of parcel 2, they talk about that in the PUD document. They have some long-range visions of some other types of sports services that I'll let them talk about. We talk about it a little bit in the staff report. But a lot of the, this is reaching a little further into the future, because this is a major undertaking in and of itself. We do note in the staff report, this is unplatted land. A plat will have to come through and address a whole litany of things that will be done to support this. The important part is we're keeping these as separate parcels, which will change the nature of how internal utility service is going to be provided, rather than breaking out several lots or parcels, which would be a bigger challenge, we think, in providing support services from a utility standpoint. I'm not going to spend a lot of time reviewing that, because I think you really should hear from the applicant about this. This is a picture from Kerry Lane looking south at the property that's currently vacant. And here I'm looking west along Kerry Lane, so you can see how this is all open, and this is mostly parcel 1 in that area. This is actually, that's not quite right, because I'm really on this little gravel drive just north of Kerry Lane, looking kind of west at what is parcel 2. That's kind of the break on that you get from that area. Here I'm looking south, and this is the gravel drive, and as best we're able to tell, that is not in the land that is land owned that's a part of the mobile home park that is to the west. So this is their drive, and this does not go through to MacArthur. In fact, it's gated and fenced off and closed off. You can't get all the way through to the south. This is the further south, further, and closer down to where that dead ends at that location. Here I'm back at the intersection back here, and I'm looking further east along Cary Lane. You have a manufactured home subdivision to the north of this property. And that is also, that's looking back across parcel 1 from that private drive that's in the mobile home park. So I don't even know where that is. Oh, well. And this is a look along MacArthur. So.
Questions for Dave? Mr. Hartman?
Do you know what acreage is for parcels 1 and 2?
Combined, it's about 56 acres. I don't have in front of me the exact breakdown between the two. I think they can tell you.
And then on Cary Street, what's the right-of-way on that street? How wide is that street?
Cary is city, I didn't look that up, but I proved it's 60 foot right away.
And then what
As
happens?
it extends to this point.
Yeah, what happens up north there? There's, looks like there's a little sliver and there's just very little access.
As I recall, looking at the plat of this land to the north, there was some right-of-way granted there for the idea that road may extend through, but keep in mind, here's 235 and it's not going to go through.
Right.
And there's, with the properties as they were platted further to the south, I know it was also on the Machinist Union property, there was a half road right or partial road right-of-way granted for what would become extension of Cary Street, and that's partially through, but that's never been improved. We'll have to, and that will be addressed as the plat for this all comes through the platting process.
Mr. Florence?
Will the houses that are planned to go there, would they be classified as tiny homes?
No, I don't, no, they're not calling, they're just, we're calling them, for lack of a better term, just individual cabins or cottages or cottages. I mean, they'll be single, and again, Susan is prepared, I think, to talk about what's going to happen with those.
Other question, Mr. Foster?
Dave, some of my questions have been answered. I have one other question. I'm looking at the general provisions. It's referring to parcel 1 parking, and it references being appropriate to the code for central business district. When we've looked at some of these in the past, it's my understanding is there's no parking requirement. So my question is, how do you deal with staff parking?
Well, that's what they're requesting is central business district standards, which is no off-street parking per se. Within their site plan, they show quite a bit of parking, and the site plan is also binding. So a little bit, I guess, is depending on how you want to cut that. It would take a further modification of the site plan, in my opinion, if the PUD is approved to change parking within that.
Additional questions for Dave? Seeing none, thank you, Dave. Would the agent or applicant like to come forward, please? And you will have 10 minutes. State your name and address for the record, please.
Levi Bond with Caw Valley Engineering, agent for the applicant, located at 200 North Emporia, Suite 100 here in Wichita, Kansas. Thanks for presenting, Dave. As all of you, I think, have in front of you, we've went ahead and revised the PUD drawing per his recommendations. I just want to quickly go through that because I know all of you want to hear from Susan because she's the one with the vision. But let's see. Yeah, okay. So going through just point by point, recommendation A was to remove the reference to 0 setbacks. zero lot line setbacks that was originally up here in the project description that has been removed and is completely addressed. Comment number B is just worried about the future of parcel 2, which is up here by 235 in the Machinist Union. That is going to be controlled by a site plan, so it's going to require site plan submittal before there can be anything put here. This parcel itself is a little more flexible in nature because they're not fully aware of what's going to happen here. The future is hopefully to have some more homes up here, maybe some more supporting businesses, and then maybe assisted living, which Susan has some history in working in that industry, and then maybe hospice, some ideas like that, maybe some forms of employment for any of the veterans working down here, trying to create opportunities. We wanted to keep parcel 2 more flexible as is along the 235 frontage. And then, so that would cover condition B. It's controlled by the site plan, so it is somewhat deferred to the future. I mean, they'll have to have approval. The staff will have to approve it before we move. Letter C, sorry about that, was requesting more prohibited uses for each of the parcels, which we did add. It's the last 3 lines of both of the proposed uses, I believe. We added that word for word. Like I mentioned in my last statement, though, when I was talking about parcel 2, it's a more flexible parcel, so there are a few uses, I think I counted 8, that are allowed in parcel 2, the commercial one along 235, that aren't allowed in parcel 1. So it's a little more flexible, but almost identical for the prohibited uses other than that. Then letter D on your recommendations was just asking for a clarification on the gathering space. I did not want to muddy the waters by making the gathering space a separate, gotta go back into it, a separate parcel. So I'm going to let Susan just talk about what's going to go on in that gathering space instead. Right now, as the proposed uses are written, they would be allowed entertainment, and she'll talk about what's going to be happening there. It's not going to be an event venue by any means. It's just going to be more of for the veterans. And then that takes me to letter E. It was talking about removing the general provisions. I have not done that yet, mostly because I'm concerned that it may want to be there in the future in case they get developing all parcel 1 and then halfway through parcel 2, and for some reason they just split off ownership, whether they've helped all the veterans they think they can in this area and want to open up somewhere else and need to sell off a portion or something like that. I think that we need to have development standards in here to control the property, even if for some reason ownership changes. That's the reason I've left it in there. That comment's up in there. If you guys want me to take the development standards out, I can. And then other than that, we're aware that we're going to have to submit the PUD certificate and the 4 copies to them. At this time, I'd like Susan to come up and quickly talk about passageways, and then the group area, and then kind of the support they have. Thanks.
Thank you to both Dave and Levi. My name is Susan Mollinger. I live at 6841 West Shade Lane, apartment 202 in Wichita, Kansas. For the last 5 years, my daughter and I have been the operators of passageways. We opened 5 years ago, almost to this day, and we have a house in West Wichita where we take in homeless male veterans and help them get back on their feet. We're getting ready to graduate, or we call graduate, our 82nd veteran on tomorrow. That means that they have gone through our program and have overcome the issues that brought them to homelessness in the first place and are ready to have a house of their own. So it's been a wonderful journey. We have several people here that have been with us since the very beginning, and I'd like for them to at least wave their hands so you can see that we have lots of support in the community. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for coming. So in the 5 years that we have been in existence, we know that the problem is a lot bigger than anybody right now believes. The last point in time count showed that there were 57 homeless veterans in Sedgwick County. Most of the veterans that are homeless don't want to come forward. They don't want to be counted. According to the guys that we have worked with in passageways, it's at least double that amount. The other sad news is that homeless female veteran population is growing, and it's growing at a very alarming rate. along with the suicide rates. With places like passageways, we don't just let them live there until they find a house. They have work to do. They have goals that they have to set and realize. They have chores that they have to do. It's not a flop house in any way. We have specific rules. We don't allow drinking. We don't allow drugs. We don't allow overnight stays. They have a 9 o'clock curfew. We do not ever grant overnight stays because we're there to make sure they're working on themselves, not anybody else. So those rules are going to transfer into Homefront. That Homefront Veteran Neighborhood is the official name of our new project. We do have 30 homes already pledged for this project, and that is pledged through the Global Family Foundation of Star Lumber and the Wichita Area Builders Association. We are working side by side with those two entities to make this a reality. So we also have 1.4 million in-kind donations already, and we haven't even gone public with this notice. So as you were asking in the comments, the use of the entertainment space, or we're calling it an amphitheater, is strictly that. It's more or less, if you think about a USO concert for the troops, that's what we're going to create there. We have bands that have come forward and said, we want to play for the troops, and that's it. There will not be any alcohol allowed. There is no alcohol on our property allowed. And so we will hold that very strictly when we have our concerts as well. Those will not necessarily be open to the general public. They'll be open to the veterans and their families. And we may restrict opening it to some, like Friends of Passageways and our supporters, but it's not going to be a general open concert type thing. Because of the fact that the whole property is a gated community, it limits the number of visitors that can come and go out of the property. We do that for very, very personal reason, and that is we protect our heroes at all costs. And many of them have friends that know when they get their paycheck and they come and they can't say no to that person and giving them all of their money. So we limit those visitors coming in and out of our current property and Homefront. The question about tiny homes, we have never ever actually talked about doing a tiny home village. We think that that's horrible. It's not enough. When we were approached with this project by Star Lumber, they had said, well, let's build a tiny home village. And we said, no, that's not good enough for our heroes. Our cottage homes, they're going to start at about 550 square feet. So they're not huge homes, but they're going to go up to about 1,000 square feet. They will have running water, heat and air conditioning, a stackable washer and dryer, a kitchen. The bathroom will serve as a safe room like they do at Habitat for Humanity, but our reasoning for safe rooms are a little different. That's not for the storms. It's for 4th of July, any type of noise. PTSD is rampant within the gentlemen that we have worked with so far, and that helps them tremendously to have a place they can go and get into the quiet areas of life and just be quiet and not have to listen to all that booming going on. That's us in a nutshell. It's a very quick little overview of what we do, but we have never taken any government money. We are 100% privately funded, and we will continue that throughout this next project. Are there any questions for me?
Any questions for Susan or Levi? Mr. Foster?
I've got 3 questions for you. You obviously have an expertise and a passion in this, but I'm curious, what is your background that provides for this?
Yes, I'm passionate. I am not a veteran myself, but my dad was and my grandfather, and that was very important to them and to me. My background, my career was in congregate housing for seniors. I ended a 25-year career working in assisted living and independent living, but when we started Passageways. Most recently, I was the executive director at Sedgwick Plaza here in Wichita.
Second question is, are there some examples out there that are similar? Are you cutting edge here on this idea?
We have scoured the United States looking for something similar. There are some things that are being built that are like items, like what we're trying to build, but nothing that includes comprehensive services. As Dave mentioned, the public area buildings, those are key to this whole project because that will be where we have members of Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, and the VA with offices there. So the heroes that are living in the neighborhood don't have to go to the VA to get services. They're right there on site. We'll also have mental health providers, case managers, and any other outside sources we need. We will be able to actually let the occupants bring their service animals and their comfort pets. And so we have a veteran already on, not on staff, but he's volunteering to come and check out all the animals before they come in. We will have, like I said, marriage and family counseling because this community won't just address the homeless men, it will address homeless females and homeless families as well.
Got one final question for you, and that is, and this may affect plating, is where the two parcels almost touch there, how does that need to operate in terms of, are people going to need to be able to walk through that area to get to the parcels? How does that need to interact?
That's a good question. Our initial thought is to place an assisted living and a hospice unit on parcel 2. That is not in concrete yet. If that is what we're going to do, yes, we will have to have that roadway completed. Carey Lane will have to be extended for fire and safety reasons. If we end up needing parcel 2 for more additional houses, we have a little bit more flexibility there and can possibly just work them through, I'm trying to work them through Carey Lane and then just complete this road here that is now gravel instead of doing the extended Carey Lane. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Foster, were you asking about pedestrian traffic, like walking across Carey Lane?
Well, you're answering the question very well because it's a broad concern, and I think at the planning stage we need to consider both pedestrian and the vehicular aspect.
Yeah, I think with plating, it'll be considered then on what happens for access, and we'll have to do certificate of petitions for access and all utilities to this, so that's all guaranteed stuff during the plating process. You're not allowed to plat without that. And then for pedestrian access, if Carey Lane ever does go through, it's going to be ADA compliant walkways to get from parcel 1 to parcel 2. Not sure what all that will look like in the future. I don't know how comprehensive it'll get, but if it's a main thoroughfare, then they'll have to do more, obviously, but it'll be ADA compliant. And then one clarification for the record, I'm not sure if it was clear or not. It is a gated community. I just want to, let me get to where it's a little clearer for you guys. I just want to point out that it's gated for all the residential area. This will be open to the public, but it's mostly open to the public, so veterans outside in the community can also come take advantage of these veteran services. So the gated area is for the residential area where the future development for more homes will be.
Can you show us on there where the gate is?
Yes, so the gate will be here, is where you drive in, and this will be fire access as well. There's emergency access that we're going to have planned up here on Carey Lane. And then the gate will be here to start, will be the fencing, and then the fencing will continue out as they develop, correct? So there'll be...
Well, no, it's going to all be fenced as we develop this right here.
Yeah, so
it's
gonna be, oh, you're going to fence the whole thing before you even develop it out? Right. No, more than I was expecting. So. But yes, eventually the whole development will be fenced.
Mr. Bill Johnson, did you have a question? Mr. Florence?
I just have a comment. I'm so glad you have included the female veterans in this process because so many times they're left out.
Definitely. Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Not seeing any other questions? Thank you. Is there anybody from the audience like to speak on this issue? come to the microphone, give us your name and address for the record, please, and you will have 3 minutes. Okay,
Jeff Blueball, 109.
just a second.
Sorry, Vice Mayor, if you speak, you probably will be needed to abstain from council vote.
Okay. Then I won't speak.
It's tough for a politician to do that, but be that as it may.
Found a way.
Okay, yes, sir. Come to the microphone, give us your name and address for the record, please.
Colonel John Buckley, 1522 East Kalispell Court, Andover, Kansas. Retired U.S. Army, 30 years. Currently the Board of Directors for Passageways, among many other things with the veteran community. Just to amplify and clarify 2 points that Susan made. First and foremost, the success that she and Jennifer have seen at the Passageways Living Center is principally based on the fact that veterans take care of veterans. And the benefit of having what I call a perimeter of veterans reinforces the strength of each individual and, more importantly, self-polices the individual veterans. And that is one of the successes that we have had within the Passageways Living Center. The foundation to the ideas that Susan and Jennifer have had relative to the home front is based on the same fellowship, the perimeter concept, where veterans will take care of veterans, but more importantly, they will police one another up. And they will ensure that they follow the road that they have set for themselves to recover from the homeless status and condition. And finally, to take up your point about the female veteran issue, there are a lot of female veterans that are now, there are a lot of females who have joined the military. And our nation has allowed them to serve in every single capacity in the military. And what we have forgotten is the fact that the impact of combat on human beings is the same whether you're a male or a female. And when we had the surge of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, that included the females. There was a surge of female service. This nation has forgotten the impact that it has, and the downstream effect is right now. You go to a VFW, you go to an American Legion, you go to the VA, and the women are not necessarily encouraged. They are, quite frankly, discouraged. So the initiative of keeping the female veteran and their families together in something like the home front is an initiative that is not practiced anywhere else in the nation that I have seen, and I appreciate your support for this effort.
Any questions for the speaker? Just thank you, Colonel, for your service. Anybody else in the audience like to speak? Yes, sir. Please come to the microphone. State your name and address for the record, please.
Titus Cordero, 813 South Census Circle, Andover. 20 years in the military, retired, 3 years in the Army, and 17 years in the Air Force. What they're doing here is they're filling up the gaps that is left when a military person leaves the military. It builds, living together, military people with each other, builds that camaraderie that they lost. Once they left that military, the service, it creates that void. This fills up that, building that community together, building that enclosed community, them living each other side by side, supporting each other. As my colleague mentioned, is what helps this community. It's what makes the good foundation for this community. As you can see, the passions and that my colleagues have for this initiative, it's right there, and the support of the community is right there. In fact, they're doing this without federal or government support. This all private sector, and you can see the support and the devotion of the local community and businesses that's supporting this organization. What I like to say is, what was going to happen here, it's probably going to be benchmarking a lot of what's going to happen to other cities. So the support that we show here now will transition and reverberate to other communities. And hopefully they'll follow through and do the same thing what we're doing. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else like to speak on this issue? Seeing none, don't think there's a need for rebuttal. So bring it back to the commission.
I'd move for,
And whoever made the motion, I'll make the second, but I
I'll
do
make a
have,
second too.
I do have a small comment. I stumbled upon passageways when, we had to move my mother out of her house, and we went through, 2 men in a truck to move her from a 1,200 square foot home to a 400 square foot, assisted living facility. Contacted contacted 2 Men in a Truck, and they work with Passageways, and we were able to donate a vast majority of her furniture at no cost, and it went directly to Passageways to serve the homeless veterans. So with my second, I would very strongly recommend approval of this.
Okay, the way I read it, Mr. Joe Johnson started first. I think Cindy passed him and finished it, but I'm going to give Joe the credit for the motion and Mr. Green the second. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Richardson.
Dave, do the changes here address your concerns? I think everybody's for this. I just want to make sure they don't get themselves in a box here that doesn't make sense. For example, provision number 13, which talks about selling it and replatting, this ownership could change within the same community, if you will. Do you feel comfortable with these?
Yeah, we do.
Something we can work with?
We do, and also the provision that was added in the general provisions that talked about parcel 2 was not happening until we got a definitive site plan submitted that was approved by the planning director before building permits are issued on that. So we're comfortable with that, yes.
Okay, thank you. I was just worried about them getting in a box here somehow.
Well, we've had an extensive discussion with Levi about that, and about the issue that normally a PUD, we get very specific about everything.
Right.
This is so large, and really, as they have said, it's a unique thing that, to a certain extent, we're creating a pattern here that
Right.
hopefully can be used elsewhere and across the country. So we're comfortable.
Ms. Gross, did you have a question? Okay, Mr. Foster.
I just wanted to make a comment that for all the folks that raised their hand, I was really surprised how many raised their hands to have benefited by this. So what you're doing here is fantastic, and wish you all very well. Thank you for coming.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yes, Mr. Richardson.
I just want to make sure on the minutes for Board of Zoning Appeals, I was absent, so I need to make sure I abstain from that. I'm not sure I got that covered at the time.
We'll make a note of that. Okay.
And then we need to look at,
Okay, I think, okay.
are we ready for the schedule?
Can we do that? Okay.
I've got a couple of comments there. We've got a meeting scheduled on Christmas Eve, which doesn't seem to me to be a very good idea. Can we slide that around in December, like the 3rd and whatever that would be, the 10th? Or
If that's
not
the will of the
10th?
board, yes.
Yeah, and if you feel like that you only need the one meeting, that would work as well, given the short time frame that we have to get everything done. But when I put that together, I was just trying to follow the normal pattern and then let the commission decide what you wanted to do with either 12 or 11 meetings.
Just so the board knows, likely what'll happen then is there'll be a subdivision committee meeting that week.
Thank you very much. But we're hopefully done by noon. But I mean, the afternoon of Christmas Eve, nothing's going to happen. I mean, it's not going to be fair to the applicants or anybody who wants to hear it. So I think we ought to deal with that, either move these meetings one way, and I don't have the calendar right here in front of me. I don't know whether you can move it all.
You can. It would be the 3rd and the 17th.
Move it to the 3rd and the 17th. I would so move that we do that then.
second.
Okay, before we vote on that, let's make sure that we're all on the same page and have got everything taken care of. Okay, so the changes would be, somebody help me out. We're set now for the December the 10th and the 24th. Those would change. Is that correct? And they would change to what?
And change to December 3rd and December 17th.
So Tuesday, December the 3rd and Tuesday, December the 17th. So we'd meet on a Tuesday instead of a Thursday.
I don't know why you're talking about it, because it says December 24th,
2019, yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. Should be 2020. Those are Tuesdays?
We have a motion. I hope we're understanding what the motion is. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Unanimous.
Mr. Warren, I've decided I'm going to take a hit for the team and join the subdivision committee.
Thank you.
Let me say it's a great group, yeah.
I heard it was a great group.
Is there any other items that need to be discussed?
Move for adjournment.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Green. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.